Come along with me as I finish this cute Highlander taking a bath. Here are the colors we'll be using today: white, desert turquoise, aqua, cinnamon, honey brown, cad yellow, sour apple, light Hauser green, dark Hauser green, and black. Here are all the colors I just mentioned on my palette. These are the brushes I'll be using today, a couple of flats and a couple of different sized rounds. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to begin by mixing my cinnamon in with a little bit of black in order to make a deeper, more chocolatey colored brown. All I'm doing with this darker chocolate brown color is just laying in a base coat over the majority of the Highlander's fur. It's just a base coat. You don't have to be super precise about it. You just want to get that undercoating so that you can get some good dimension when you go in and add the highlights with the lighter colored browns. I'm going to speed it up here at this point. I'm going to give my brush a good rinse, and I'm going to begin moving on to the honey brown, and I'm going to fill in this other area of his face with this lighter colored brown. And I'm going to continue using the same color on the tops of his legs. Here I'm just going to add a little outlining on his hooves. I just finished putting a second coat over the lighter brown on his face and legs. And now I'm going to begin using my small liner brush, and I'm going to start putting in the little swoosh marks to make his fur. I start off with the honey brown, and I'm just going in different places and just adding in those little I call them swooshes. So you can see just laying down and pulling the brush, random directions, random lengths, random thickness. Just enjoy the process. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, think of a Highlander cow in real life, and their fur is going to be going every which direction. The main thing is just to allow that darker background to show through so that you get the dimension. Now I'm mixing a little white in with my honey brown to give me just a little bit of a lighter brown than what I had on my palette. And I'm going to go in and just continue to add these swoosh shapes and just continue adding a dimension by adding highlights here and there. Again, I'm adding a little more white to my lighter brown color just to make it even brighter. And I'm going to go in and keep adding more highlights here and there. So I dropped a little paint on an area of my canvas that I didn't want. And so while it was still a little wet, I just took a damp piece of paper towel and just wiped it off. I love that about acrylics. It is so forgiving to work with if you catch some of the oopsies before they dry. But even after they dry, you can still do things. So don't let yourself worry if you drop your brush in the middle of your canvas and get paint where you don't want it. Okay, I am just going to continue bouncing back between my different colored browns, and I'm going to keep adding more fur to his face, and then I'm going to move down into his legs and the front part of his body that's closer to the tub, and I'm just going to continue working on the fur. Let's go ahead and paint the black in his eyes and in his nostrils. So while I wait for the fur that I just painted to dry completely, I am going to move on to the daisies. And even though the white canvas is showing through, I am still going to paint each of my petals with white paint because there are those outline marks that are showing that I would like to cover up. And I just actually prefer having white paint versus just the canvas. That is my preference, but you obviously can do it however you want to do it. So I'm going to fast forward here while I finish painting each of these petals. I didn't like how this one petal got a little too big, so I'm going back in with some of my dark Hauser green, and I'm just touching that up to dial that petal back just a little bit. Let's move on and start painting the centers of our daisy with some of that cadmium yellow paint. I'm just going to, again, I'm using my small round brush. I'm applying paint to the brush and then I'm just dabbing it into the center of each of these flowers. So now we're going to move on to the bubbles in the bubble bath. I'm taking my medium round brush and I'm making sure that I get a lot of paint on that brush. You want to really have it thick. So when you go down and start dabbing it onto your canvas, you are getting almost like a little bit of a textured look. You don't want to be precise. You want your edges to be oh, what's the word I'm looking for? You just don't want a straight line because they're bubbles. So they're going to be all different shapes and sizes. With that same brush and without cleaning it out, I actually mixed in just a very tiny amount of black to make a light gray color. And I'm going in randomly throughout my bubble bath and I'm just dabbing in some gray areas. Again, this helps to break things up and gives things a little bit of texture and dimension. So now we're going to start applying some grass. And all I've done is I have just taken my brush and dipped it into my water to get it a little bit damp. And I mixed it in with some of my Lighthouser green paint just to make it a little thinner. It makes applying blades of grass a little bit easier. You're going to see me start to add some small trees way back on the horizon line in the distance. And I didn't like how it turned out. So you're going to see me go a totally different direction here in just a moment. And here we go. We're getting ready to change our mind, and we're going to just make some hills in the background. So here I am starting to make some hills instead of trees. So oftentimes when I'm painting, I find that the angle in which I'm trying to paint is not real comfortable, and you really need to be mindful of this. So oftentimes I will take and I'll turn my canvas just like I did so that I'm not contorting myself in a way that I end up with a horrible neck ache. Now I'm going to just add a little bit of my sour apple green color, and I'm going to add some highlights to the tops of each of these hills. I mixed some of my dark Hauser green with a little bit of black, and I'm just going along the horizon at the bottom of those hills in the background, and I'm adding some darker color. Now I'm going to go and add a few more highlights to the top of the hills again. I'm going to go back in and add some more detail to the fur on his legs. Now I'm taking all white paint and I am going in and adding even more highlights to just a couple of areas on his face and ears. I'm going to continue on down to his body and his legs again, just adding highlights here and there. Now I'm going to fill in the horns with some white paint. Let's bring those eyes to life just a little bit by taking and just putting a tiny dot of white in each eye. Now I'm going to go in with my small round brush and some white paint, and I'm going to go over all of the petals on my flowers. You'll sometimes find that it takes multiple layers in order to get it the way you like it. I'm still trying to cover up some of the outlines, um, but this also just makes the flowers just a little bit brighter. While we're at it, we might as well go ahead and put another layer of yellow in the center of each of the flowers. Here you're going to see me begin to just mess around with the sky. Um, I had some areas that I didn't like from when I had worked on this earlier today. So I am just going in with random shades of blue paint and just trying to get the sky kind of the way I want it before I add my clouds. So I haven't even let the blue paint really dry that I just applied. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start adding in some clouds. And with my medium round brush, again, I'm just making sure I have a lot of white paint on my brush. And I'm just smushing it in every which way to form a cloud shape. You want to keep going back in and reapplying more white paint over some of the areas of the clouds because, like clouds in real life, they tend to be brighter in some areas and darker in others. So just play around and add highlights here and there. So I had to stop recording earlier, and when I started painting again, I forgot to start recording. So here's the finished painting. As you can see in the very back horizon, I went ahead and added in a few more trees again. Another obvious change is I added the bubbles. I really wish I would have recorded doing that. I am so sorry. And then I also added some outlining around his snoot, and I added in some details to the tub itself. So some highlights and some shadows just to kind of give everything a little bit more of a realistic look. And I finished up my clouds in the sky. And yeah, so this is the finished product. I had a lot of fun doing it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon.